found the words in there kind of interesting as I was sitting over there that we can choose to be, because that's kind of what, Barbara, you were talking about in your readings in terms of choosing what we can be and children of paradise. And it reminded me a little bit of when I was younger and growing up through traditional church and traditional religion about children of God, being children of God. And, you know, just for a moment, as I sat there and I heard those words, my thought went to children of God. Do we choose to be children of God? Because to me, when we talk about it in that term, it feels like, again, my opinion, it feels like we're talking about having to be led, having to have a different, perhaps, or thinking of or listening to perhaps a different opinion that maybe we have as a child, or having to go with whatever the parents say we have to do, or being that child that the family thinks we should be. So when we look at things like that, I have to wonder, is God really feeling that all of us are children and have to be led and can't have our own opinions and have to be in a mindset of what somebody else is telling us? Or is it perhaps possible where we can look at this as it is not a God and God's children, but we are all part of a divine source? We are partners in a divine source, not children of a divine source. And in that way, what happens, the way at least that I look at it and how my mind functions, and I have to be the first to say my mind doesn't always function in a normal way, but the way my mind looks at that is that gives us a sense of understanding that we do have choice, that we do have the opportunity in our journey, in our lifetime, in the way that we want to live our life. We do have choice. The other way around, to me, doesn't include that choice. If we are in service to, and that's one thing, I love spiritualism, but one thing about spiritualism rhetoric sometimes that makes me a little crazy is when people say, I'm in service to the spirit world. We're not in service to the spirit world. We're not in service to God. We're not in service to any other person unless we choose to be. So when we work with the spirit world, we are in a partnership with the spirit world. We are blending with the spirit world. We are blending with that energy. We are not controlling that energy, nor is the spirit world controlling that energy. And I would like to think in the perspective of the divine, of the source, of whatever word you want to use for where we all came from and where we all go to. I would like to think also that we can look at that in a way that we are partners in that process. If we choose differently, we can choose differently. If we want to do something in a different way, we don't have to necessarily look at something that's been given to us from a religious source and say, you must do this and you must do that. Or if you don't do this, you burn in hell. That was always, that was always the one that got me when I was younger, right? Like, oh my gosh, really? Is that really what's going to happen? If we do this, we're going to be punished. If you don't do that, you're going to be punished. It always came from that viewpoint of the parental figure that was not necessarily a very loving, kind parental figure. And in my own journey, as I started to look at these things and make my own choices in what made sense to me and what felt right for me and what in terms of partnership with the divine, I wanted to do, I had to look at those things and really wonder, would that be something that a divine source would be saying to us? Would that source that we say is love, would that source that we say is love want to do something that to me is very not loving. You know, you're going to put me in hell and fire and brimstone for the rest of my eternity. I mean, how is that loving? It's a good control method. Yes, it's a good control method, because if you get out of line, this is what's going to happen to you. But that to me does not give us, who are part of the divine, any sort of choice. And life, love, the divine, there's choice in that. There's ways of looking at our life, our path, the way that we want to experience life without what feels to me, when we talk about those kind of words of punishment and fear and, you know, eternal damnation, that to me is like chains on us, heavy weights. You know, those things they used to, and they may still put on prisoners, the ball and chain, you know, and they would walk with that thing on because they couldn't escape. That's just like this. You can't escape. You're hooked in. You're chained to. You're in fear of. All of those things then are taught. They're taught as part of God, if that's a word you want to use, of spirit, if that's a word you want to use, of the divine, of love, of the great source, whatever word you choose. But that then becomes, we have no choice. So I try to look at it from a very different perspective. There are times, and I think all of us fall into this category at certain times in our lives, maybe not, because I don't want to speak for you. And especially over these last few years, where I've looked at this and said, what's going on? And where's my choice in this? Because at times I was feeling I had no choice. You know, we had to shut the center down. We had to social distance. We had to do certain things that for the benefit of all of us, yes. But for me, I felt like there was no choice. And would the great source, the divine, the love, would that be something that would happen in a way that I could say, well, my free will choice is this, but I'm choosing in partnership of the divine to help keep everybody safe. So my choice in that moment was, we have to shut the center down. But it was a choice. We could have kept it open. We could have not done the rules. We could have done things differently. But my choice in that moment of time, again, right, wrong, indifferent. The choice at the time to me came out of love, and it came out of a partnership of being part of the source of each and every one of us that said, no, let's try to keep everybody safe. Right choice, wrong choice, who knows? You know, maybe someday we'll all know that. But right now, it's something that we have the freedom to make choice every moment and every day of our life. Do we choose to stay in the old mindset of whatever that mindset is for you? Do we choose to stay in fear if that's what's going on with you? Do we choose to stay unbalanced, whether that's emotionally or whether that's physically? Are we choosing to do these things? Because it's very easy to push those things off and say on somebody else. Okay, that person made me feel this way, and therefore I can't or won't. Where is our choice? We always have choice. Now, there's some times in our life, and I will say we may get into a situation where, because of circumstances, it may limit our choice in that moment of time. But there's still choice. We do or we don't. We walk forward or we don't. We think outside the box or we don't. Not one thing is right and one thing's wrong. It's just what's right for you in that moment of time of you being a piece of the divine, of the great energy of love and light and source. And my light is no brighter than anybody else's light because I'm standing up here. It's just because I lost a bet a long time ago. I'm trying to keep to that bet. There's been many a time that I've tried to walk away from spiritualism. I've tried to walk away from the connection to the spirit world, not because it was something that I would say would be something that happened to me. But there's been a lot of times that I had that choice or opportunity, and we all do, and I made a different choice. And I saw that in my own growth as a person, as a piece of that divine, of the piece of that love. Now, we all go through tough times. Let's face it. I think again, with spiritualism, especially, one of the things we do not do very well as spiritualists is, or one thing maybe we do too well, we talk about the spirit world in a way that makes it sound like, oh my gosh, don't we want to go there for vacation? Don't we want to just hang out there where we don't have to worry about, is the car insurance paid? Is the price of milk going to be tripled the next time I go to the store? What's going on in the world? Who's going to press that button, that may end it all? I mean, there's so much going on in the world. And we talk in terms of the spirit world as understanding, as loving, as being available to learn, as being a reconnect for the people that we have who have gone to the spirit world before us. We talk about it in such a way that we promote death. We promote death because who wouldn't want to click that button sometimes and not worry about all the stuff that's going? I almost said a different word, but yeah. Thank you. So, we have to look at this from a perspective of, going to the spirit world does not change our choices. The stuff that we are still dealing with or still trying to make the choices about are still going to be there for us to do. So going to the spirit world doesn't alleviate that. But sometimes as spiritualists, we talk about it in a way that makes it sound like that is a better choice than being here. And my thought process on this is we're all here because of a choice we did make at one point. So what do we do in order to make our choices here better, stronger, more consistent, moving us forward rather than sometimes feeling like we are chained with that ball and chain and can't move? So one of the things that I heard recently, which I'd never heard before, and that's not unusual, but it just kind of stuck with me a little bit. And there was a woman, and I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, offhand, but she was an Olympic runner. And in her story, she was talking about she was training for one of the Olympics, and she couldn't do this one time. She wasn't making her time on this one type of run, and I know nothing about running, so I'm sorry if I can't give you the quarter mile thing, but I don't know what she was running. She couldn't make it. She couldn't make her time. And she was getting so frustrated. And her coach, and this is, again, we all have coaches in our lives. We all have mentors. We all have those people that sometimes just are there to help us in a momentary second that changes our world. We all have them or have had them. So her coach, her mentor at the time, said to her, but don't you understand the law of thirds? And she said, no, what's the law of thirds? And he said, anything you do in life is the law of thirds, which means a third of the time it's going to be great. No worries, walk along, singing, humming, everything's fine. A third of the time is going to be okay. Like, you're moving along, it's okay. It's like, but it's okay, you're moving along. And a third of the time is going to be terrible. Now, said you can look at the terrible as terrible and something that you would stop yourself from doing. But if you understand that 2/3 of the other time in that event or in that struggle or in that life or in that relationship or in this or in that, whatever that event is, 2/3 of the time, it's going to be okay or great. So in that third of the time, that's not so good. Can we find the lesson? Can we find what's there? What's there for us to allow the other 2/3 to work? And when I heard that, I like, it's brilliant. Like, it's brilliant to me, because how many of us think so many times that everything every day should be sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, right? We think because we are connected to the divine, that we are, some of us are spiritualists, that some of us walk this path of trying to be in grace, that every day should be wonderful, everything should be good, everything should work out. But we signed up, we made a choice for this experience. And in this experience, 1/3 of it may not be so good. Doesn't mean we've chosen wrong. It may be that we've chosen that experience for that 1/3 to be wrong, or not so easy, or a little difficult. Because what do we learn out of it? What is our choice? So when I heard that, it did make me, I was listening to it, I was doing a walk, I was listening to it on a podcast, and I had to stop for a minute. I said, that just made sense to me. It just made sense. So hopefully by talking about that for a moment, it might make sense to you. And when we go through these days or hours or months or sometimes years where it's not so easy, we can look at it as, well, we're still in partnership with the great. We're still part of that love. We're still part of that thing that we may call God, or we may call the spirit, or we may just call the great intelligence. So if we can look at these things from these perspectives from time to time, then we have the opportunity to feel we have this choice, to know that we have a choice, and then to put in place, to put in the workings that choice. And you know what? At the end of the day, if that choice isn't right, guess what? Guess what? We don't get the slap on the wrist like the little kids with the feeling of, I'm a child of God. We don't get the slap on the wrist. What we get is another opportunity. We get the next moment, or the next day, or the next experience, or the next 2/3, the next third of what that experience is. So when we are in this kind of sometimes blender feeling of what's going on in this world, and we think sometimes, you know what? They're talking about the spirit world. That sounds like a better choice to me, because there are days, right? We're like, I can't anymore. This is enough. We have to understand also that that is always a choice. But the fact that we, in our own beings, can make a choice any moment of every day, of any day, we can make a different choice. And it doesn't disconnect us from the greater spirit, the greater power. I feel when we make these mistakes, and when we get back up and keep moving through that 1/3 of our time that's not so easy, it not only makes us stronger, it makes us more connected to our purpose and in the relationship that we have with the spirit world, in that greater source of whatever that word is that you use. But again, just like they say with Namaste, our light within us is connected to everybody else's light. That light is our soul. That light is our source. And even though people may look different, even though people may have different opinions, even though people have different journeys on their life, it doesn't mean that we're all not a part of each other. And that's why to me, my optimism comes in as if, things are going to be okay. Things will get better at some point in time. When we get through the 1/3, that's not so easy right now. It's not okay. So with the thought of Barbara's reading, and then with the Children of Paradise, and with the thought from that one Olympic runner about the law of thirds, we can take a look and we can make a choice. We can make a choice. Do we want to change something within our being, within our path, within our life? Do we not? There's not one answer, and it's not yes or no. It's not right or wrong. It's not a slap on the wrist or you're going to be in hell forever. It's just a choice. But we have the right to make that choice as individuals. So hopefully throughout this week, as we move through it, through the rest of July, which we're getting close to the end, the rest of the summer, the rest of the year, as these things come up for you, you may remember, you may bring back in that thought of let's connect rather than let's disconnect. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attention.